Hello and welcome to another Aviation Week Network Air Transport Month interview. My name is Jens Flotter. I'm the Executive Editor Commercial Aviation at Aviation Week. I would like to welcome today on the program Thomas Raynaert, the Managing Director of Airlines for Europe, A4E, the Brussels-based lobby organization that represents the big European airlines. Only a short 3 or 4 months ago, the industry was hopeful that the worst of the coronavirus pandemic was behind it. With the infection rates seemingly under control, airlines were adding back capacity and hoping to steadily grow out of the crisis. Yet here we are, and it seems the worst may be yet to come. Thomas, when was the first time during the summer that you felt things are going the wrong way again?
Good morning, Jens. It's good to talk about this topic again. Well, the summer season, as you know, is traditionally the most important season for the airlines business. If your summer season doesn't go well, it doesn't look very good for the entire year. To be honest, we were quite hopeful still at the start of this summer because of the publication of the European Commission's guidelines on reopening of the intra-EU borders. And also because of the gradual lifting of non-essential travel with third countries. So it looked good around mid-June, but it was immediately clear shortly afterwards that some member states were not really sticking to the European Commission's guidelines, which of course are recommendations. And even worse, they were actually not coordinating their travel restrictions with the other European countries. So what you had then is you had the creation of a total, what we call a patchwork of national measures, which actually then negatively impact the consumer confidence. People started to doubt, they didn't know what was happening. So if you don't have the confidence, then that's a big problem for the airlines, for the bookings, for the planning and so on. And unfortunately, this is still the biggest challenge facing the airlines, the lack of consumer confidence. Despite of all the safety and hygiene measures that we have put in place as airlines and airports and as a sector, despite the fact that we had agreed those with the European authorities, you see that these national, disparate measures are really killing the business. I think as one important European airline CEO said it just recently, he literally said, passengers are not afraid to fly. They are afraid of travel restrictions and quarantines. So that gives you sort of the picture where we are, unfortunately.
And it does lead to kind of a really bleak outlook, right, for the winter. I mean, I'm seeing more and more airlines cutting back on capacity plans. Some say they will fall below 20% of traffic. What's your take?
Well, the situation is quite sobering, Jens. I mean, so we come out of a summer season which was a failure, and which caused a lot of frustration amongst passengers and airlines and all of us. And we're entering then a winter season which doesn't look much better. Actually, it looks worse. If you follow the Eurocontrol numbers, I mean, from week to week, it's actually getting worse. We're seeing actually a steady traffic decline amongst A4E carriers since September. So since the end of the summer season. And of course, mostly, we're in the middle of a second wave that really doesn't help across Europe. And so what you have as an immediate reaction is that national and regional governments want to impose additional restrictions. So unless there is really a breakthrough with an EU testing protocol for travel, because the testing is here going to be crucial, unless we have that, and which would also mean that not just the Commission would support this new proposal, but also that the member states and national governments follow this. I fear that we will be heading a very, very challenging winter season, which may lead to some airlines being forced to ground their operations, as in the first wave, or worst case, that some may never take off again. Recent figures show that on average, European airlines have less than 6 months of cash to operate on. So counting that through the winter season, that means that beginning of next year, some of these airlines will face serious consequences.
You've mentioned it, testing. The industry has been pushing for months for a testing regime that is adopted by at least the European states, and ideally, globally or more broadly. But how realistic is that to happen still? Since, I mean, as you say, we're in the beginning or in the middle of a second wave, which probably makes it even harder for governments to go the other way and open up.
Well, the question around testing is that the PCR testing is still being considered as being the golden standard by the ECDC, the European health authorities, basically. And it's true that some of the other testing, the antigen testing, which was promising, but in the beginning was not sensitive enough back in the spring to be approved and to be widespread. But today, so we're seeing more antigen testing, which can reach very high levels of virus sensitivity, being a lot cheaper, easier to use. These are tests that you and I could use at home before boarding an aircraft. You don't have to be trained for that. And the big advantage is also that you have the rapid issue of the results within 15 or 30 minutes. And a few of these tests have actually now been approved to be used throughout Europe and now can be used widely. So this is something A4E very much together with the airports community very much supports. A systematic use of this rapid testing in Europe, we believe, could be really a game changer for air travel. Of course, thereby, ensuring that travelers, whoever gets to the airport, is really COVID-19 negative before they get to the aircraft. And it would also avoid, very importantly, a blanket quarantine measure. So we see now in many member states that national governments are implementing blanket quarantine measures, quarantines which really don't work, which is actually being formally confirmed by the ECDC. The quarantines are not the solution to resolving the COVID-19 spread of the virus. So as A4E, and we really call upon the member states to invest in the testing capacity, which looks like more antigen testing capacity, both PCR and antigen, but antigen needs to be part of also that solution.
But it seems that the bigger problem is that travel as such is still seen as a big risk to be avoided by many governments, thus the quarantine measures that you've mentioned. But isn't it true that the travel as such isn't the problem? The problem is how you behave while on the ground, while you're there, regardless of whether you've traveled somewhere on an aircraft or by train or by car.
Yes, I mean that's correct. It is not, and I think there have been some interesting debates in some member states, including in Germany, where actually especially say it's not the movement of people, it's the control within the areas of the virus, which is very important. So cross-border travel within the EU and the Schengen area continues to be treated differently than domestic travel, and there's no reason to do that. It's without justification. So, and then you have extreme travel restrictions, in particular these quarantine measures, which are really looking at zero risk strategy. So we need to move from the so-called zero risk measures to a risk mitigation via pre-departure testing, especially because we know that quarantines are actually not going to work, or not an effective way to fight the epidemic, as I said. So along with the active calls to avoid traveling abroad within Europe, national governments have actually effectively demonized our industry, not only the travel industry, but also thereby the tourism industry. What is actually an integral part of the European way of life, the freedom of movement, not only of goods, but obviously also of people. And this really needs to change. That's also why we've written as A4E a very clear letter a couple of weeks ago to European Commission President von der Leyen, asking the European Commission to take the lead in the development of this EU testing protocol for travel and the implementation of it to avoid quarantines and in order to further reopen the border. So on the Commission side, and we fully welcome the Commission's proposed EU coordination framework for travel restrictions back in September. But the Council immediately adopted a watered down version of this proposal, which will effectively now allow member states to continue to apply their own measures on testing and their own measures on quarantine in particular.
So what the Commission is proposing works at least better for you than the individual and differing measures by the national governments.
Yes, correct. So the European Commission is in favor of not only a harmonized solution, but at least coordination of the travel restrictions. So we're fully on the same page of the European Commission. I think the issue is that the Commission doesn't have mandatory power. They can only recommend. Yeah. So it's not binding. And the national governments, also influenced by regional governments, of course, are having their own way. It is up to them, to their discretion, to take the measures. And these are de facto national measures. What we're asking for, together with the Commission, is at least, if you are taking national measures, coordinate these measures and also tell the sector, i.e. also the passenger, in advance when the measure will be entering into place and what the impact of this measure will be.
You see the willingness of European governments to participate in a second round of bailouts. There's been a lot of support, in the spring, globally, but also in Europe. Now it seems, as you say, things are getting much worse again. Will governments come back in again?
That's a very good question. I think, so what we've seen in the first part of the crisis, right up until the summer, is that because of the challenge of liquidity with airlines, as soon as you stop flying, you can't sell tickets, obviously, and then no cash is coming in. So in order to preserve the cash or to have some kind of a cash reserve or some liquidity reserve, most airlines have gone out either to the markets for additional private funding, issuing bonds, what have you, private loans, but also governments have actually helped some of the airlines, at least in Europe, but not all of them, to support them in order for them to continue to survive. We're still in the survival mode, and as I said before, unfortunately, because the travel situation has not improved, they continue to burn the cash, all of them, including the ones that actually have privately or publicly have received cash injections or have received certain assurances through credits or loan guarantees. So if the situation continues as it is today, I talked about the less than 6 months of cash reserve, I think we will see more airlines look for additional funding, but I believe that will be both private, it could be public. Public funding is, of course, a very tricky one that, as A4E, at least, we want to make sure that whatever happens there is that we continue to have a healthy competition in the market. Public funding should not distort the market. It can help the market, but it should certainly not distort the market. So that's something from a competition perspective to keep in mind. But the answer is yes. It looks like chances are that in the next couple of months, airlines may have to go back, or at least some of them may have to go back for more funding.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much, Thomas. I think that's all we have time for, unfortunately, now, in this program at least. But I hope that all of you continue to follow closely the interviews, the features, and the webinars of the Air Transport Month online at Aviation Week. Thank you.
Thank you, Jens. Have a good day.